Gabriel, are you back? Call to order the regular meeting of the study session for the Planning Commission of Wednesday, May 20th, 2020. And we've got one item. I guess I will ask Gabriel if you could do the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Roll call, Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Kaczynski.
Here.
Commissioner Wu.
Here.
Okay, Commissioner Wu present. Chair Pro Tem Kendall.
Here.
Vice Chair Blackwell.
Here.
And Chairman Rowland.
Here. All right, I will give a reminder for everyone to please go on mute when you're not speaking. It will keep the line clearer so everybody can hear better. And with that, we'll jump into our discussion of the draft massage ordinance. Jennifer, do you want to kick us off?
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Jennifer Savage, Senior Planner with the Planning Division. First, I'll start off giving you a bit of background on where we've been with the massage regulations, and then I'll go over the proposed amendments. In 2017, the City Council directed the Human Affairs Committee, or HAC, to review recommendations provided by the I-5 Freedom Network to amend the city's massage regulations. HAC and staff worked together to address those recommendations. However, the work was put on hold in 2018. In 2019, City Council directed staff to work to amend the massage regulations to address human trafficking and the I-5 Freedom Network's recommendations. So what's proposed? These changes that are proposed address the I-5 Freedom's recommendations and some additional clarifications recommended by staff, including corrections to erroneous text. Attachment 2, beginning on page 5 of the package, contains a list of the I-5 Freedom Network's recommendations, as well as the code section on where you can find those proposed recommendations. You should note that Title 17 and Title 5 would both be amended to address massage regulations. Attachment 3, which begins on page 7, are the proposed red line text amendments for both Title 17 and Title 5. If you would flip to page 5, attachment 2, you'll see on the left column of the table is the I-5 Freedom Network's recommendation, and on the rightmost column is the code section in which you'd find that recommendation addressed. You'll notice in the rightmost column that several of the recommendations were either wholly or partially addressed in our existing regulations. You'll also notice that there are some new provisions that would be added to Title 17 and Title 5. These recommendations are all included in the red line text in attachment 3. However, staff would like to draw your attention to the third recommendation from the top of the table. That is for a hotline poster. The hotline poster would identify a national human trafficking hotline for members of the public or for the establishment to contact in the event that they need help with human trafficking issues. Staff is asking the Planning Commission to consider whether this should be included or not. Staff does not recommend the inclusion of this in the city's regulations because it is already a requirement by state law. You'll note that red line text to address this recommendation is included in attachment 3 should the Planning Commission want to include this. So what's our plan for tonight? We would like the Planning Commission to consider the proposed amendments and provide staff feedback. Staff will take that feedback, make any changes to the red line text where applicable and if necessary, and come back to the Planning Commission for a regular public hearing. Staff would like to note that a public comment was submitted for this evening's study session, and it is the discretion of the chair on whether or not staff reads that into the record. This concludes staff presentation, and we are available for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. How long is the communication? Is it within 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, then why don't we go ahead and read that into the record, please?
Thank you. Dear Planning Commissioners, I would like to thank you for considering these ordinances to address the very real and challenging reality of illicit massage establishments in San Clemente. They are a hub for trafficking and exploitation and a vehicle for organized crime. Additionally, California remains the state of the largest number of cases reported at massage establishments and spa services, and the sixth reported venue for sex trafficking according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Based on a variety of sources to include in the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force, OCSD, and Online Discovery, there are indications that these establishments operating in great numbers not only all over the country, but also here in San Clemente. Investigations in OC have found that approximately a third of these establishments are operated by the same family cartels. Conditions are exploitative. They advertise on sites offering sexual services, promote Asian service providers, fake cash-only payments. A quick search on sites that narrow down by zip code show 8 establishments in San Clemente being advertised as such, and around 80 establishments and mobile services within a 10-mile radius. RubMaps and Red Massage are sources that OCSD, Vice Department, and the OCHTTF regularly use to initiate action. California has a state law, SB 1193, that is reiterated in the proposed amendments, and that has required signage that includes massage establishments, and this year extended to hotels and motels. Although including this demand in our city amendments may seem redundant, it demonstrates the city's commitment to eliminate the continued victimization and exploitation of those individuals caught in the industry. In May of 2015, our City Council unanimously passed Resolution 15-19, stating its commitment to strengthening the fight against human trafficking. By endorsing these amendments as submitted, it will be the first act in support of this resolution. Again, thank you for your consideration of endorsing amendments as submitted. If you have any questions, I am available for you. Sincerely and gratefully, Brenda Wells, Founder, Executive Director, I-5 Freedom Network.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go through each of the commissioners and call on you so that we can make sure everyone gets a chance to comment. After I go through everyone, I'll just, since this is the study session, I'll just open it up to everyone, and we'll see how well that works. Commissioner Kozinski, do you have anything you'd like to discuss with us? And I'm not hearing anything, Commissioner Kozinski, so you may be on mute.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Do we have any comments from the public in regard to any of these sections?
This is Jennifer. Only that public comment which we just read.
Okay. I have no specific questions.
Okay, Commissioner Wu?
Yes, this is Commissioner Wu. I have a few questions, Jennifer. In fact, the first question is to our city council, the assistant attorney. To what extent can city hold property owner liable for operators' problem? We say if we issue a fine, if the massage parlor has a code violation and the city issues a fine and they don't pay it, and we can go after the property owner. Usually a property owner, as long as they take a reasonable efforts, my understanding is how do we hold them liable for something that's not under their control? Is that practical? This is my first question. City Council, can you hear me?
Jennifer, you might be on mute. If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
I'm so sorry. I thought that was a question for the city attorney.
No problem.
The city attorney has reviewed our red line recommendations. Their review came a little bit after the report was published. However, that particular section is legally valid.
The city attorney is not here in the meeting. Is he?
This conversation is very garbled to me, even though I'm on mute. What section are you talking about, Commissioner Wu?
I'm talking about the proposed requirement for the landlord to be responsible. For example, if we go to page, let's go to the proposed ordinance. If we go to page 9, Article 28, and underneath the section E, operational requirements, then 1. So it says a massage business license shall have the premise supervisor at all times and also provisions about operator or designated manager, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, it says that the violation upon the premise of any massage establishment of any provision of this section by any agency, employee, or independent contractor of the holder of a massage business license shall constitute a violation by the license and / all the property owner. And there are a few more places in this document mentioning it. I'm just wondering if we can actually do that. And then we go to page 21 of 28, at the very top, number 12, it says a statement to be by the property owner and a bunch of other people that the third parties shall be responsible for the conduct of all employees, massage technicians, and independent contractors. So we're asking the property owner to be responsible for the conduct of the business. They lease the property. How much can we ask the property owner to be responsible for that?
This is Jennifer. We will make sure that the city attorney addresses that when we come back for a public hearing.
Okay. So another question is, I'm not sure, Jennifer, in your document, when it says if a business is closed, they cannot be open in the same address or location for 2 years. First of all, if the business voluntarily closes it, can they be reopened? Secondly, the same address, do you mean the same parcel or the same suite? If there's a multi-tenant property and the landlord can easily, say, shift it to a different suite, but that considered the same address? I need a little clarification on that.
The intent is for any suite or business location on the same property, and the intent is the 24-month provision is there for those establishments that are closed as a result of abatement or violation. And so staff will make sure that both of those are clear when we come back for the public hearing.
Okay. I mean, we can simply ban them from reopening a business in the city anywhere for another 2 years.
No, I'm sorry. Correction is whether it's that one particular property as covered by an APN or whether it's the specific suite. And we'll clarify that, but you would not be able, the provisions don't state a specific location, but the review requirements do address an operator moving to a different location in the city and making sure that if that operator was part of a violation, the new business license would not be approved.
Okay. Another question is on page 8, facility requirements. Item 1 and 3. 1 is about identifying notice. 3 is about hotline poster. Identifying notice shall stay in English and Spanish. And then the hotline poster shall be in Spanish, English, Vietnamese, and Cantonese. First of all, I want to write a difference here. Secondly, for identifying notice, English is a no-brainer. Everybody uses English here in this country. Why Spanish? It's Spanish. Why not Vietnamese? Why not Chinese? By the way, Cantonese is a spoken language. The written language is called Chinese. And then, why not Korean, Japanese, Tagalog, and other languages? Where do we draw this line?
Thank you for that question. The difference between the two regulations come at a recommendation of the I-5 Freedom Network, which closely follows the recommendations from the national organization. So it was determined by them that those languages should be different, the breadth of the type of languages. Thank you for your correction regarding Cantonese versus Chinese in the written form. We will make that correction. Drawing your attention to facility requirement number 3, the hotline poster, that specific requirement of languages beyond English and Spanish come from the law, which includes essentially, but not necessarily this verbatim language, that other predominantly spoken languages in the area. And based on our consultation with the I-5 Freedom Network, they had identified Vietnamese and Cantonese as the other predominantly spoken languages in this area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Brown. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I did a couple of, 2 comments. I think otherwise, many of this stuff is very well done, having gone through this thing 3 or 4 times, Jennifer. And I'm glad you coordinated with I-5, which is a really good move, and I applaud you for it. On the, I get my fingers to work here just a minute. On the first part of your massage establishment, page 7 of the briefing, paragraph C, review requirements, subset 1, massage establishment business license required. You've deleted minor conditional use permit, and I wondered why. I had a question mark. The way it reads here, all businesses that are proposing to conduct massage from a location with an approved and active conditional use permit, massage services must obtain approval for a massage establishment business license. But you X'd out minor conditional use permit, and I was wondering why you did that.
Thank you for that question. This is one of the clarifications that staff is recommending, so something for the Planning Commission to consider. This would separate those businesses that require a massage establishment business license from those businesses that require a business license for the primary use. So in the first provision, minor conditional use permit, which is for accessory massage services, is deleted. And then there's a new secondary provision where it's just the business license for those accessory massage establishments approved with a minor conditional use permit. So it just separates those provisions and makes it a little more clear.
Okay, so you moved it to number 2, business license required, because that's where conditional use permit comes up again?
Yes, we moved minor conditional use permit to item number 2, those
Okay.
accessory massage establishments that do not require a specific massage establishment business license.
So I read those 2 paragraphs, and it just didn't become clear to me. I don't know if it was clear to you, but it wasn't clear to me what you were trying to accomplish there.
Okay, thank you. We will address that.
Getting back later in an area that hadn't been touched, we debated a lot. I'm trying to get back to the page. I'm trying to open my phone and do all this stuff. When we get into a lot of times, and I think I just didn't see it in here, the definition of an employee, sometimes these individual, quote, employees or, quote, subcontractors. In other words, the young lady gets caught in room 3. She's a subcontractor. You pull her license, but the basic business license doesn't get affected because that's the way the business is structured. Each employee is a subcontractor. And I was trying to look through here on the various definitions and provisions, which you didn't make any changes through, massage attachment and exemptions, and I just didn't see a very clear area there of how we define employee and contractor and subcontractor in there, so that they all roll up to whoever owns the business license. And so, just because the young lady in room 3 gets caught, it rolls up to the business owner and then necessarily the property owner. And so I didn't see that in the definitions in here somewhere. Can you show me where that is?
Yes, thank you. So on page 16 of 28, towards the middle of that page is the definition for employee. Another related definition is on the following page, on page 17, and that's a massage technician.
Okay, and so employee means any and all persons other than a massage technician who may render any service to the licensee who receives compensation from the licensee or agent and who does not perform massages on patrons. That's an employee, is that right?
Correct.
And then the other, massage technician means any massage practitioner or massage therapist who administers to another person for any form of compensation, a massage or other similar procedure, and who is certified by the law, California, in compliance with the California Massage Therapy Act. So you think we have the subcontractor category carried or identified in these 2 definitions? It isn't clear to me that employees, either the technician or the employee, could be acting as a subcontractor also. Is this? And I know we don't have the assistant city attorney here, but we had a big debate about this when we talked about this 3 or 4 years ago. That's why I bring it up.
Thank you. We will make sure that's addressed.
And run it by Mal or whatever, because I think some of the problem we had in the past was that type of a category. And so, thank you very much. Those are the only questions I had. Other than that, a very good job.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Crandall, do you have any questions or comments? And if you're saying anything, we can't hear you, so you might be on mute.
Mute to unmute. How about now?
Yep, you sound great.
Okay. Yeah, my questions have already been addressed. The one I have is on page 9, second paragraph. You're talking about window visibility into the unit. And I think you might want to address signage also in that paragraph.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes, Jim, thank you. So I have comments regarding the sections C1 and 2, D8, E9. C1 and 2, just for clarification. So it's the permits, the licenses required are either one or two, not both, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That question came up. Made a note of that just to make sure there's not overkill on the licensing. And why couldn't we address, why couldn't we just have one type, permit type with conditions that are specific to each project type instead of having two different names?
Are you referring to massage establishment business license versus business license?
Yes. So business license with condition. I'm just throwing it out there only because it is a business, and it's not uncommon to apply special conditions to a permit or to a license that are intended to address special circumstances that use may bring or cause issues that may be caused by it. So why couldn't we do just one type of a license?
There are two different licenses and two different types of conditional use permits as they relate to massage establishment. The massage establishment business license is for a full massage business, one where massage is the primary use. The regular business license would not be required for that massage technician operating as an accessory massage use at a different primary business, say a chiropractor's office. Rather, the chiropractor business, they would have that primary business license, and the massage would be accessory to that. And so that's why we have those two distinctions. Each of the massage services, both the primary business and that accessory massage, would both have conditions because the primary requires a conditional use permit and the accessory requires a minor conditional use permit. Does that answer your question?
It does. I just think it could be handled if we're already going through a discretionary permit, either major or minor. We could still apply a business license like to any other business, just each with special conditions that are relative to that intensity of use. That's just my personal thought on that. But okay, that makes sense, and that's the way we're going with it. And it must be good. Okay, thanks. And then D8. So this is all new language, and it gets into blocking and access, really, and prohibiting access or slowing access. The last sentence reads, in the context of the section, quote, blocking doors, unquote, shall mean any type of device, temporary or permanent, living or otherwise, which restricts, prohibits, or slows entry into a room or provides advance notice of entry. I just want to be clear that we have something in place that does not discourage the business operator from placing some signage on the door, at least for the privacy of the customer. Like, for example, signage indicating that there's a massage in process, right? So if the door is not to be locked, that sign could be considered a mechanism to slow entry into a room, or at least provide some caution before entering a room. So hopefully that there's clarity on that, so that there's no issues later on. Because I can imagine that somebody receiving a massage would want somebody accidentally opening the door, whether they're covered or not. It's still kind of a personal experience, like being at the doctor. It'd be uncomfortable if somebody walked in on you that wasn't supposed to. So how would we address that? Or can we adjust it, add that language, and add something to the effect of, at the end of that sentence, maybe except for signage indicating that a massage is in progress, something to that effect.
Yes, we will include that language. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then our last comment is E9. And E9, remember this one from last time we looked at this. And so I'm going to read part of the first sentence and suggest a modification to it that I think might be a little more comprehensive. I'm gonna start. It says, there shall be no storage or use of any instruments, devices, or paraphernalia which are designed for use in connection with specific sexual activities, including but not limited to. And then there are 3 specific types of things that are noted there, which I think we could get a little more specific with our, or we could add language that would be a little more comprehensive, and then continue on after those 3 descriptors there to say and or any other goods or items which are replicas of or which simulate specified anatomic areas. So my suggestion is that we would consider placing, instead of those 3 words, we would say including but not limited to electric and non-electric, mechanical and non-mechanical devices and or goods or items which are replicas or which simulate specified anatomic areas, and so on. That way it's sort of a catch-all, because that's really more of a specific, it leaves, the foregoing portion of that sentence is more, it kind of covers much, but there's no uncertainty. When we get into naming specific items, somebody may misinterpret that. So if we say any electric or non-electric, mechanical or non-mechanical devices and or goods or items which are replicas of, and so on, that might be a little more applicable here. It leaves no uncertainty. And if any other commissioner has a comment on that, it's just, I think I may have discussed this last time we talked about it a few years ago, but did not reference my notes from that time, but I remember having a concern about that language as well at that time. Oh, and I'm so sorry, Jessica, one more. During the last review of this language, we also talked about, there was a proposed condition here that all patrons would be required to provide their identity. In other words, a copy of the driver's license or identification card. I did not see that here. Has that been stricken, and if so, why?
I don't have an immediate answer for you, but I will find that out and make sure that that's addressed in our public hearing.
Okay, perhaps it was a legal recommendation, or if anybody else has a comment, Commissioner Brown, maybe?
No, I was looking for that myself. Some sort of register where they come in with their name and, a true address or some sort of identification. I would also, so I think we should have the city attorney look into that. In addition to the paragraph that you just went through as far as deleting the vibrators stuff, you go to the next line, and it says replicas of which simulate specified anatomic area. I think the word should be stimulate, not simulate. On paragraph 9 of page 10. I think that was around 10. But certainly the customer should be able to, or should be required to sign in with a proper identification, and that should be part of the record.
Yeah, or perhaps stimulate and simulate, or stimulate. Both are effective and applicable. So that's all the comments I had, Jessica, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just have a couple of comments. One is just on the item we were just speaking of on page 10, item 9. I'm actually okay with this verbiage. I think last time we were looking at this, if I recall, there was actually some concern about, not to be too indelicate, but, things that could reasonably be used for more than one purpose. And so you start to kind of, get into trouble with the language. And I think that this does a pretty good job of sort of covering what we need to cover without covering too far outside the lines into things that might, accidentally serve as, as something else, or as I said, at multiple purposes. I think too, it was brought up, free storage or use of any, yeah, okay, so I think this handles it too. There was a concern of what if someone goes, for some massage therapy, and they just happen to have, a condom in their wallet or their purse or something like that. And it sounds like this item would not consider that a problem, because it's not displayed, stored, or used, and everything like that. So I think that would take care of that sort of concern. But all in all, I think for me the Texon 9 is I think is sufficient for what we need. The other comment I had was back on the hotline poster. I think that's very good to have, but I think it's probably okay not to have in our code and to defer that to the state and have so that allows that sort of thing to be more consistent across the state, which might be a good thing if people get used to seeing the same signage wherever they go. So I think, assuming that the state is making sure the sign's up, has some standard that they have for the sign, then that not only will that be covered, but then there will also be something that will be consistent for people. So those are my only comments on it. Before I open this up, since we have some time left, before I open this up to everyone, Jennifer, I just wanted to see if you needed any clarifications or had any questions of any of the commissioners.
No, I do not. Thank you very much for your detailed suggestions and comments.
Okay. Does anyone have any other comments or maybe responses to what other commissioners have brought up?
No, I'd just like to say, Jennifer, very good job. I'm coming off my 10th anniversary on the Planning Commission, and one of our first things I did 10 years ago was a massage therapy ordinance that came out of Sacramento with NIMBYs, and the massage therapy industry had taken over and bought votes, and it was terrible. And it's been 10 years, a long journey to come back. So this is going a long way, and partnering with I-5, I think was absolutely outstanding. So I really congratulate staff for doing that. That's all I have to say.
And thanks. Thanks, Donna. Let me just remind everyone that was Commissioner Brown speaking, and this is something I'm sure we're all going to forget at times. So when you start to speak, if you haven't been directly called on, if you could just announce your name so everyone knows who's speaking.
This is Commissioner Wu. Jennifer, I have one more question. On page 11, item 17, regarding entry and exit. It's a long paragraph, but to sum it up, client has to go through front door, entering and exit. Is there any benefit to allow employees, subcontractors to go through a side door or something? It would be easier to just have everybody to go through the front door.
I don't have a final answer for you, but we will take that into consideration and address it at the public hearing.
Of course, what they're discussing is required by building code for emergency and safety. That would be, you have to have them, but if they use that, maybe there can be alarm set up. So that to discourage people to use the back door to get in and out. Because we can say client has to go through the front door. Sometimes they don't. We know they don't.
Well, I think this is Commissioner Ruin. I think there might be an issue with that for all establishments, because I can imagine, for instance, deliveries, they probably don't want, especially bulk deliveries, to be coming into the front door. They would want that in the back door, and it's even possible that, say a high-end exclusive establishment, wants to reserve the front entryways for just their customers. So I understand the motivation for it, but it may be constraining people a little too much. That would be my concern. Any other comments on this item?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Kuczynski. I just want to commend Jennifer for doing a great job of putting this together, and it was very thorough and comprehensive. I do have one small question, and that's if we do choose to collect identities, would that, and you don't have to answer it today, would that pose any kind of HIPAA violation? And an onerous task on the business to protect that data. So just something to think about.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Commissioner Wu, this is one of the first items I discussed back in 2015. I'm glad to see it comes back with some refinements, and I hope that we can make a good progress against human trafficking. Thank you.
All right, if there are no more comments, I will close this item. We can break until the top of the hour, but I would encourage everyone to stay on the line so that everyone's prepared to go at 7 o'clock. Okay, we have Jennifer. Yeah?
Can we have a side discussion on meeting format with the city planner while everybody's on the line, Jim? Share rules?
Sure. Yeah, I think
Because I guess last night City Council tried to do it via Zoom, where the acoustics were a lot better, the sound quality is compared to this memeing line on my phone, so I can understand everybody and everybody could see everybody. I don't know if it worked okay for council, because we use that in the future until we figure out how to really get in the same room.
Yeah, for me, I'd rather use web conferencing. I use it all day long where I work, and the sound quality is almost always better than regular phone lines. So I'm all for that, but I think it's up to what our IT department can bear and what the city council wants to give us.
Well, if the Zoom is good enough for city council, why isn't it good enough for us?
Mr. Commissioner Wu, it will be good, but that's just a starting. It's just maybe they expand to our commission meeting.
Gabriel, do we know anything about that? Sorry, go ahead, Gabriel.
I just wanted to let you know the meeting is still recorded, so if you are ending the study session, I would just make sure to acknowledge that to our IT manager, Brian Brower, so that they can stop the meeting, unless you are still continuing discussion on this for the study session purposes.
No, this is just an informal discussion. So we have concluded the study session item, and we're actually on break until 7 o'clock. Then we will start the planning commission meeting.
Great, thank you.
This is Jonathan.
Is Don Brown back on?
Hi, Jonathan. Hey, Don. We're started here. Just a minute. I think we can go ahead and start. So our IT guys can begin to record. And I will call to order the regular meeting of the Planning Commission of San Clemente, California for Wednesday, May 20th, 2020. Michael, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Certainly. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic stands one nation, under God, liberty and indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Gabriel, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Thank you, Chairman Rowland. Commissioner Brown?
Here.
Commissioner Kaczynski?
Here.
Commissioner Wu?
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Crandall?
Here.
Vice Chair Blackwell?
Here.
And Chair Rowland?
Here. And I will remind the commissioners as well to please mute your phone when you're not speaking. When you come off of mute, if you haven't been announced, please announce who you are so we know who's speaking. And the votes we have, I'll do as roll call votes so that we can accurately record everyone's vote. So item 4 on the agenda, special order of business, we have none. Item 5, minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. Our first one is the regular study session meeting of April 22nd. Does anyone have any changes or a motion?
I move we approve the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting of April 22nd. Commissioner Brown.
Is there a second? Commissioner Brown seconds.
Yeah, Brown moved and Kaczynski a second that.
So Brown moved, and I believe Crandall seconded it, if I'm not mistaken. So all in favor?
Aye.
I just told you I was going to do a roll call vote. I couldn't be pardoned. Let me call that. Commissioner Kozinski.
Aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Crandall.
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell. Commissioner Blackwell, you might be on mute.
Aye. Yes.
And Commissioner Rulin abstains, as I did not attend that study session. So that is 5 in favor, none against, and 1 abstention. Next, we have the minutes of the regular Planning Commission meeting of April 22nd, 2020. Does anyone have any changes or a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the City of San Clemente Planning Commission of April 22nd, 2020. This is Mike Blackwell making the motion.
Mr. Brown, I second.
Commissioner Blackwell made the motion. Commissioner Brown second. Do the roll call. Commissioner Kozinski.
Kuczynski, aye.
Commissioner Wu.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Crandall.
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Rulin votes aye, 6-0. Item 6, oral and written communication. Members of the public may address the Commission on matters of public interest which pertain to the city and are not otherwise on the agenda. Speakers can submit their comments on agenda items to the Planning Commission electronically. Material may be emailed to scottm1@san-clemente.org. Transmittal by 3 p.m. on the Planning Commission meeting days is recommended. The Planning Commission is not permitted to discuss or take action on items that do not appear on the agenda. So, Gabriel, do we have any oral or actually written communication that's been sent to us for items that are not on the agenda?
Chairman Rulin, this is Gabriel Perez. We do not.
Very good. Item 7, consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion without discussion unless Planning Commission staff or the public requests removal of an item for separate discussion and action. We have one item in our consent calendar. Are there any commissioners who would like to pull that item for discussion?
This is Commissioner Brown. I'll move to approve it.
All right, let me just check, Gabriel. Are there any requests from members of the public to pull this item?
There were no requests from the public to pull this item.
Okay, so it looks like that's a motion from Brown to move the consent calendar.
That's correct. Or you want me to read it, that we approve a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Clemente, California, planning the fiscal year 2021 capital improvement program consistent with the San Clemente General Plan.
Okay, motion by Crandall, second. Commissioner Crandall seconds. We'll do the vote. Commissioner Kozinski?
Aye.
Commissioner Wu?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Crandall?
Aye.
Commissioner Blackwell?
Aye.
And Commissioner Rulin votes aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. We are at item 8, public hearings. The public hearing process includes a staff presentation, a presentation by the applicant not to exceed 10 minutes, and public testimony not to exceed 3 minutes per speaker. Following closure of the public hearing, the Planning Commission will respond to questions raised during the hearing, discuss the issues, and act upon the matter by motion. And as a reminder, since we don't have live public input, our city planner will be reading all written communications during the public hearing portion. During the public comment portion. Our first item is item A, 16 Camino de los Mares, and that's going to be presented to us by Jonathan Lightfoot. Why don't you kick us off, Jonathan?
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Jonathan Lightfoot. The item that we'll be looking at first this evening is for familiar site Plaza by the Sea at the Camino de los Mares off-ramp. And I'll be going through the several entitlements that are requested for this and breaking that down. To make this clear and so that we can all follow along together, I'm going to request that everyone jump to attachment 6. That's the staff presentation portion. And then, of course, if we want to jump to any individual pages in the report or other attachments, we can. Attachment 6 begins on page 71. I'll just give 1 second for everyone to get to that point, and then I'll begin. Okay. The project in front of us this evening is for a new drive-through building. It's actually a replacement and reconstruction of an existing building at 610 Camino de los Mares. So the request is to demolish this existing freestanding commercial building and to construct a new 4,250 square foot commercial building for 2 tenants, including a drive-through and an existing commercial center at 610 to 628 Camino de los Mares, also known as Plaza by the Sea. Let's move to the next page, 72, which shows the location of this site, which sits in between the 76 gas station and another commercial plaza, Ocean View Plaza. Both commercial plazas are owned by the same company, Brixmor, and Brixmor acquired this plaza, Plaza by the Sea, a couple of years ago. It's well known in town, especially for the anchor tenant, Stater Brothers, and this area is part of the Camino de los Mares focus area of the general plan. The area is also a freeway gateway because it is adjacent to the off-ramp at the Camino de los Mares interchange, and it's zoned as Community Commercial 4. Let's move to the next slide. This slide just shows the current status of the building. It was formerly a Crispin's or Baker's Square, a restaurant that was housed within this building. You can see that it had kind of a faux Spanish style with stucco walls and a tile mansard roof. Moving to the next slide, page 74, we can see a rendering of the proposed building. The proposed building includes 2 tower elements to indicate the 2 different primary entries for the tenant spaces. Each of those spaces is accentuated by deep inset entryways that are surrounded by decorative tile, one of which is rectangular, the other is an arched opening. You can also see on the parking lot side of the building, there is an attached patio area that would serve the coffee cafe tenant, which is the same tenant that would be served by the drive-through, which wraps around the rear side of the building, not visible in this elevation. Let's move to the next slide, page 75. This slide indicates those elevations where the drive-through would be visible. These elevations face the 76 station and the off-ramp, respectively. Although there is one sign shown on this, there is a condition of approval, of course, clarifying that there will be no signage permitted facing the freeway. The drive-through plan view is shown on the next slide, page 76. Again, there are 2 tenant suites, and cars would enter from Camino de los Mares, wrap around to the right around the building, which borders the 76 station. Queuing within the drive-through aisle is for 9 or 10 cars, and then there's an additional 6 cars that can queue within the shared drive aisle of the parking lot area, for a total of 15 to 16 vehicles before that queue reaches Camino de los Mares. During the DMT process, the applicants did provide a queuing study that was reviewed by our Public Works Division that evaluated drive-throughs of a similar nature, and the Public Works Division was satisfied from the information in that queuing study that the proposed drive-through here would be able to contain all vehicles on site without impacting that public right-of-way. Some of the other elements in this area would be some new pedestrian-scale trees, some new permeable paving for the pedestrian areas, that's the green hatching, and then of course the patio and outdoor dining area. Moving to the next page, page 77, We're moving to the opposite side of this plaza where some additional work is proposed. This is a couple of images of the area where there's an existing boundary wall between Plaza by the Sea and Ocean View Plaza. The two plazas in the past have been owned by separate entities. Now they are owned by the same entity, and the city has expressed interest in the past in connecting these two plazas. There is a grade difference, as you can see from the image, and so that is one of the challenges that had to be taken on in this project. You can also see in the image on the right what the current trash enclosure looks like. Moving to page 78, the applicants have provided a rendering of what the wall removal would look like with a new pedestrian access that would come from Ocean View Plaza connecting to the well-known Trader Joe's area. So someone visiting Trader Joe's would be able to walk out of that store along a protected sidewalk all the way over into the other shopping plaza now. To accommodate this new pedestrian access way, the trash enclosure was relocated. You can see that it has been moved further to the background in this image. And that new trash enclosure would include stucco walls and a traditional tiled roof element. Moving to the next page, we have the plan view of this area, again showing that pedestrian access way, the proposed landscaped areas, the relocated trash, which is shown here as the gray box on the left side of that plan view. And this new area would include two-way vehicular access as well as that pedestrian pathway. Moving to page 80, the next slide, Design Review did review this project on January 29th and recommended that it move forward to Planning Commission with a few comments to be addressed with staff in between. A couple of those comments are listed here on the slide. For instance, commenting on a treatment where the rake of the roof should be modified. A typical treatment would be to wrap that tile over the rake and flake the stucco to encapsulate the tile. That's not shown in the rendering, but staff has had discussions with the applicant and they are amenable to a condition of approval requiring that detail to be a part of the construction drawings, and that condition has been included as 5.15. Another comment was to create an easier left-hand turn. The applicants have modified that area to soften the left-hand turn coming from Stater Brothers for a vehicle that's near the Stater Brothers entry that would be entering the drive-through from that direction. A left-hand turn would now be easier to make with the revisions. And finally, Gareth, you concurred with a variety of other staff recommendations, some of which are indicated here on the response side, where stucco insets at the doorways are indicated to be 12-inch minimum, and those storefronts have glass storefronts that now match the insets. The previous iteration, for instance, showed an arched stucco inset with a rectangular glass storefront. The applicant has now updated that to have a glass arched storefront to match the inset. Moving to our final page, staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission determine the project to be categorically exempt pursuant to Section 15302 of the CEQA guidelines and to adopt Resolution PC 19-019 approving these entitlements for the Plaza by the Sea drive-through. Staff is available for any questions. I did have a conversation that I would like to relay with the applicant today regarding a couple of conditions. So I'm going to put that in front of you now as well. They did have one concern with condition 1.9, and we can come back to this again during discussion. That condition relates to future changes in tenancy and the ability of the city to re-review the use permit at that point. The tenant wants to clarify the language so that there's no confusion that the original tenant, that no additional steps are needed for the first tenant in moving into that space. And additionally, they had commented that they believe that condition 7.18 covered the same potential concerns as condition 1.9. So that was something that they had commented on to me in a conversation today, but otherwise they are amenable to all the remaining conditions, and that concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. We'll go through the commissioners one by one to see if there are questions. Let's start with Commissioner Brown this time. Do you have any questions for staff?
No, I do want to thank the city planner for providing me a full set of plans so I could really evaluate the project. Once I got them, I could certainly appreciate it. And I'm sure Commissioner Blackwell will appreciate all the trees and shrubbery, but I do support the project and I think it's very well laid out. Thank you.
Commissioner Crandall, do you have any questions for staff?
No, I just want to compliment Jonathan again on his work product, and he worked very well with this applicant, and the applicant worked well with the design review subcommittee. So I think they've put together a very good project.
Commissioner Blackwell, any questions for staff?
Yes, I do. Yes, Jonathan, good job on this. It's been nice to see this one go through the various, the progression that this property has gone through since I've been on the commission. It's nice to see. I think we've seen varied approaches to design and cleanup of the property. So this definitely gets us across the line and then some. So I do have a couple of questions, if you wouldn't mind. I need to know, what is the, so we have the, Brixmor is the owner of both shopping centers, both properties, correct?
Correct.
Okay. What is Brixmor's intention? I mean, why do they want to remove that wall and create access? What is the intent there?
So that element actually was somewhat city initiated. They had been contacted when there was a change of ownership by the mayor at the time, who expressed an interest in that being one of the future improvements at the property, along with a request, that this Plaza by the Sea see some improvements as well. So it was actually an initial conversation from the mayor that put that onto their radar for a project to do. Okay, so we have two separate parcels, same owner, but either could be sold at any time to a new owner. So there could be multiple owners in play at some point in time. Have we, and forgive me if I've missed it, and I did read the report, it was very well put together, but I did not make a note on this other than a chicken scratch note, and that was regarding reciprocation of parking, or some sort of reciprocal easement for that pass-through to ensure that there would be, access there protected. Have we thought about that? Is that something that we could have further discussion on if it hasn't been considered? That wasn't something that was discussed at length through the DMCR design review process, partially because to cut off that access would also require some form of staff approval. At the very minimum, a staff waiver to create a new wall if someone in the future were to sell the property and try to return that to the state that it was in, would still require some form of discretion, even if it was at an administrative level. It wouldn't just happen without the city being aware of it. So it wasn't something that was viewed as like a high priority, but certainly that's something that we could include as a condition. Again, just with the forward-thinking thought that that makes that clear that the city desires that to be something that's in perpetuity.
Yeah, I would think that might be a nice move, only because an RA could it would provide both properties, or maybe at some point both parties those basic rights, right, to have that operation, have some kind of harmonization between the two, right? So there would be some protection in there that could always be changed later, but at least we have that in place. Because I think it's going to be a great relief, honestly. I mean, I don't know how many times I have driven out of one of those centers just to go around the corner, stop at the light, and go back to the next one. I mean, this is going to be fantastic. So I really appreciate that. Okay. And then the other question I had is I noticed it, and Commissioner Brown was correct. I looked at the landscape plan. Looks like our consultant did not review this, or did our consultant review the LS sheets on this project?
Our consultant did review this project, and actually there was a chance for revisions in between. The primary comment that came back from SMP, our landscape architect, was to include separated sheets that indicated, that clearly indicated what trees were to be removed, and also that the end result resulted in a greater number of trees at the site than currently exists, which is the case. We do have about a net gain of 10 to 15 trees after the removal and installation is put together. So it has been reviewed, the preliminary plans, but again, there is a condition requiring the review of irrigation, et cetera, the more detailed landscape plans during the construction phase.
Okay. Well, I did see that. I am happy to see the integration, especially at the rear. There was discussion, have been multiple discussions over time about our concern of the exposure to the I-5. That's a lot of folks travel through town there, and this is a very visible location. We've got, a number of, was it 8 or so of the sycamores, which are beautiful when they're a deciduous tree, but when they lose their leaves, we're going to still have a nice looking trunk there. Otherwise, I would be concerned that it would not accomplish our objective, and that was to add some additional screening to the rear of that building, just to soften the hardness, the hard edges and lines of the structure of Stater Brothers. So I think that what is there now would still be sufficient, just the sheer number of those trees. So, but getting back to the Community de los Mares area, I noticed there are 4 photocarpus proposed, 36-inch boxes. There are 6 existing now. They look to be somewhat mature. They're relatively small, and that variety gets pretty large, but those are, for some reason, not very large, and there's continuity along the streetscape there. It looks like there's going to be an additional 4 placed on the grass median in between the sidewalk and the parking lot, which is relatively narrow. Two of the concerns I had, one, is that the boxes that are going to be planted are going to be very low. Even if they're standard trees, there's going to be some limited visibility to the signage eastbound. Their new monument sign, they're relatively new. We had looked at this some time ago as part of the signage package. There'll be some obstruction.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Blackwell, forgive me for interrupting. I just wanted to make sure, we're asking questions of staff, and this sounds like good material, but might it be better for our Planning Commission discussion?
Yeah, I understand. No, it is a question of staff. I need a clarification.
Forget it down. Please go ahead.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Kim. The reason I'm asking, just to cut to the chase, is that sidewalk has inadequate space relative to accessibility around the existing trees. There are grates, and it leaves just a couple of feet of hard surface that is unrestricted. So if somebody was to try to roll their wheelchair by there, it would be a bit of a challenge, because on one side you've got the grass, you've got the edge of the sidewalk, and then in some areas you've got the grates. Is the intention here to move that tree in onto the private property and eventually eliminate the existing street trees so that we can open that sidewalk up for greater accessibility? Is that what's happening here, or is the intention really to cluster all of those photocarpus in the way it's shown on the plan?
Good question. The intention actually is to add new trees and maintain the existing trees. There was a condition, rewinding to the prior project at this site where there was a facade remodel done. As a part of that, and as a part of kind of the agreement with ADA improvements, et cetera, the applicant has already granted an easement to the city along this property line to allow for an expanded sidewalk that's a part of an upcoming CIP project. So the city is going to be redoing sidewalk in this area, and that is something that we've identified with Public Works, that there are locations, as you've mentioned, where we don't have the 4-foot clearance on the sidewalk. And so my response would be that the intention of the applicant is that through the easement, the city is going to be able to widen that sidewalk, and that these trees should not impede our ultimate goal of providing a 4-foot clear sidewalk along that stretch. That is something that I can discuss further with our landscape architect if there is some concern that the mature size of these trees could cause problems with the sidewalk through that area, because that is the city's goal, is to have a compliant sidewalk along that frontage.
Understood. Thank you for that. So I would just add to that, there will be some conflict with these trees. It's got light variety there. I really would hate to see the removal of mature street trees, especially if they're healthy and there's continuity on both sides, up and down Camino de las Matas right there. I mean, but in this case, that might be an opportunity. This plan does not reflect, this proposal does not reflect any widening whatsoever. So with that consideration, it just doesn't work. So I'm hopeful that you will certainly, make notes of that and focus on that. It's important. And then the last comment I have, Jonathan, is at the apron, the exit apron. The landscape plan shows plant material all the way across. I'm assuming that's a mistake. It appears to be blocked by, a new landscape planter there. So it'd be in the northeast corner of the parcel along Camino de las Matas at the exit apron. That would be on LS1.
Yes, I'm looking at that now. Yes, that certainly is a mistake. There's no intention to close that apron. That's a good catch. I think that they just hatched that enclosed space and didn't cut that off in their CAD drawing. But correct, that exit is still intended to remain.
Okay. Some folks just like their hatching. Okay. Well, yes, good job. That's all the questions I have of staff now. Jim, so thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Commissioner Kozinski, any questions?
Yeah, I just a couple real quick. I just want to commend the applicant. They did a great job of implementing everything that the design review suggested. The 18 trees that are being removed, those are the large interior trees, correct?
Yes, a good number of those are larger trees. For instance, there's some eucalyptus. A couple of those were removed with the prior. There was a landscape plan that was approved with the facade remodel, and they did begin some of that work. And that did remove a couple of eucalyptus that were close to Building E. That's the Cafe Rio building. And there are mature eucalyptus trees close to the existing pad building that you would see from the existing site photos, etc. And some of those mature trees, yes, are proposed to be removed.
And I'm looking at the really small drawing here. I don't have the digital. I'm not looking at the digital. But what size of the trees are you placing in there? And because I see them along the street line. But what size are they?
Okay. Give me just 1 second.
I think they're 36-inch boxes. Are you talking about foot of carpet along the streetscape?
Yeah, Camino de los Matas, are they 36-inch boxes?
That's the plan. Yeah. How big will those be? Probably around 10 feet tall.
Okay. All right, so it'll provide a decent landscape. That's all I had. Thank you.
That's not maturity though, so that variety can get 50, 60 feet tall in ideal conditions. So, but the existing, what are there, I believe, are the same. Those are under 30 feet. So,
okay.
And that is Commissioner Blackwell speaking.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Chris, was that it, or did you have more questions?
No, I was impressed. We had a lot of changes, or we had a good number of changes at the design review, and it looked like the applicant implemented a lot of them, and if not all of them. I was very impressed.
Thank you. Commissioner Wu, any questions?
Yes, so this is Commissioner Wu. Landscaping condition. As the end caps drive aisle to be converted into landscaping area. Jonathan, if I understand it correctly, on those end caps are the irregular shape. They look like sawtooth, if you will. And how many square footage are there if you add them up? And how much increase would the landscaping area get? Because currently it's 15.5, I remember, right? So after the conversion, what is the number?
Good question. So if we are able to convert all of those irregularly shaped areas into landscaping, the CAD drawings don't call out the area in those, but just judging by, I'm looking at the same sheet you are, judging by the comparative size of a parking stall to those, a typical parking stall is nearly 10 by 20, and we have 8 of these. And a lot of those end caps are not going to be quite the full size of a parking stall, so it's going to be in the range of, I would guess, about 1,000 to 1,200 square feet of additional landscaping that we would capture from converting the buffers that are currently just paint on asphalt. So by having that be converted to additional landscape area in the interior part of the parking lot, we'd be gaining about 1,000 square feet additional. Given that the parcel is as large as it is, let me jump back to the original, our title page. I doubt that the percentage increase would even be a full percent. One second while I grab that number, and then we'll... Commissioner, I apologize. I'll have to return to you on how that would change the percentage. Again, I think it's going to be less than 1 full percentage point, so jumping to maybe 16.5% of landscape area. But I don't have the number in front of me to make that calculation right now. As I find it, I'll chime back in with that updated number.
Well, that's good enough. Thank you. Also, well, first of all, is the applicant okay with us to accept this condition?
Yes, I have discussed that condition specifically with them, and they did comment it does add additional expense because they would have to provide some form of irrigation, likely, at least temporarily, while any new plantings take root in those areas. So they're cognizant that there would potentially be some additional costs, but they did assent to that condition.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So go ahead, Commissioner Crandall.
This is Commissioner Kuczynski.
I have just, go ahead. Okay, hold on a second. I thought I heard Commissioner Crandall speaking. Did you have something you wanted to say? Or, no. Not now. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, great. Commissioner Kuczynski, did you have another question?
Just real quick, Jonathan, did the applicant read and agree to all the conditions in the in this project?
So I did have communication with them today, and I'll just reread again. I actually do have an email from them, so I'll read this email. It's what I was referencing at the end of the report. So this is from Kyle Godot, who is has been my primary contact from Brixmor for this project. And he states, our preference is to eliminate condition 1.9 as it makes it very hard to move forward with construction of the drive-through building with the risk that the city could reject future tenants. I believe the city is still protected by 7.18, which states that the drive-through must be contained on-site. If we can't strike that condition, I can write a letter and request the Planning Commission to remove. Let me know what works for you. So I didn't get a separate letter from that, but that was something that he stated to me in that email, and then from a conversation following that they would prefer that 1.9 either be removed or be clarified to give them some clarity of what that would look like for future tenants. And to clarify staff's intention with condition 1.9, the current property owners have a lease agreement, obviously, with Stater Brothers, and Stater they have significant power over what new tenants can come into the site, and so they have said that they would not be favorable to larger visited tenants like Chick-fil-A, In-N-Out, and Starbucks at this site. And so the queuing study that was reviewed by Public Works was not reviewed for a tenant of that magnitude. It was reviewed for more of a mid-scale tenant type. It was a coffee bean and tea leaf is actually the tenant type that was reviewed. So 3 different project sites for that tenant. And so the reason for staff in including that condition is kind of to give us a way to evaluate whether that queuing study that was reviewed for this project is still applicable for a tenant should a different tenant move in 10 years, whether that new tenant is still going to be compatible with the queuing analysis that was done by our Public Works division now.
All right, thank you.
This is Commissioner Rulin. I did have a question. They're currently at about 15% plant coverage. Usually we would require, I think it's something like 25% plant coverage. We've got I know a lot of this was done as a remodel, but we also have a building that's being torn down. We've got a wall that's being torn down, the thoroughfare through. So I'm just wondering why it's still at 15%. Is that purely because it's grandfathered in and they simply have 15% by right?
Yes, that's the situation, is that to replace that building, there's not a substantive area that where hardscape could be removed that's not already being used for required parking or for required access for deliveries, like the back side of the Stater Brothers building, where obviously their trucks have to make the deliveries. We just wouldn't have the ability to remove that landscaping, and hence staff, looking for any small locations such as those smaller islands within the parking lot where we could capture some additional landscaping. The intent in this area is actually to allow for a higher FAR, where you would have for potentially like 2-story buildings instead of single-story buildings. So the lower development intensity here is kind of what results in the existing lower landscaping level. And yes, replacing an existing building with one that's essentially identical footprint doesn't really provide us a lot of opportunity to increase the landscape area.
I guess where I'm confused is, kind of the answer was, well, there's no room for it, or we can't see any room for it, and that hasn't, short of a variance or something, that hasn't really been a factor. We found ways to do it, I guess, is something to say, even though it's been difficult in some places. So if they're at 15% right now, I'm still trying to get straight in my head why they're not required to go to, I keep forgetting the number, but I think it's 25% landscape coverage. Why aren't they required to do that by code? And if they are, then we have to find a way to do it. But if the code says, well, even though you're destroying a building on this lot or whatever, you're allowed to stay at 15%, then okay, they can stay at 15%. But so far, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, I don't see how it's allowed for them to stay at 15%. And the question I'm asking is what is it that allows them to stay at 50%? It can't be just because it's hard, because that's not unusual that something is hard for an applicant. If I made my question clear, I hope.
Yes, you have made your question clear, and just give me 1 second. Fortunately, I'm able to have a computer in front of me, so I'm going to get the specific citation that does address that question.
Okay, and I don't need you to trouble with the specific citation. If this is a situation where it's grandfathered, you guys have already looked at that. That's good enough for me. But if we're not sure, then we should look and make sure that this is an allowed thing, or if we need to actually, follow the code and the design guidelines and have 25% landscaping.
Sure. So it is something that we've looked into for this and other projects. And the code standard is essentially defers to the hearing body. So the code standard says where there is an existing developed site, when it is non-conforming due to landscaping, the hearing body may require full compliance or partial compliance, aka moving further in the direction of compliance with the percentage required during the hearing process. So the code defers this to be really a discretionary decision from the Planning Commission to what level of landscaping should be required. In this case, ultimately that would come down to whether you think potentially certain parking stalls should be replaced and merged into creating a larger landscape area. For instance, over by the two-way drive aisle, you have a landscape island that is directly adjacent to a couple of parking stalls. So that's something that can definitely be discussed. And again, the power per our code is with you, the Planning Commission.
Okay, great. Thanks very much for clarifying that. We can cover that in our discussion.
This is Commissioner Brown.
Mm-hmm. Please go ahead.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Brown.
Yes.
Yeah, Commissioner. A question of staff. I think, isn't there a parking waiver situation in effect with this parking lot now? And part of it was driven by, or mitigated by removing the wall and trying to make the parking flow between the two shopping centers. But I think the current number of stores and their use in the parking lot now is, we needed to write some waivers as it is. I don't think they can afford to lose any more parking spots. And so maybe we had to reconsider and kind of honor this grandfathering on the landscaping. But that's my question to staff, is I think there's a parking waiver out there somewhere. Is that correct?
So in this case, obviously we have a few different tools that we can use with parking, and we have addressed parking not long ago here at this site, but not with parking waivers. It's always our preference to make that kind of the last option. And we have multiple stores here that are sharing the same parking lot, and so this is a perfect candidate for on-site shared parking, which requires a minor conditional use permit. So the Plaza by the Sea was granted a minor conditional use permit maybe a year and a half ago, and how we approached that was, given that there's a constant in and out of different tenants, instead of evaluating or tying conditions to specific tenants at this site, what we did was actually implement the slightly more favorable downtown rate at this location. So one parking stall is required for 5 seats instead of 4 seats for a restaurant, for instance, because there is obviously like a large opportunity for shared parking the same way that we have downtown. So by implementing that gave them a bit of flexibility. But because the two tenants there haven't been leases signed for the 2 spaces here, if they lose spaces, that could restrict, the type of tenant that goes into one of those spaces. They have a surplus currently, so they would be fine to put in the tenant, certainly for the drive-through cafe use, but it could potentially impact the other suite and what type of use goes to that suite.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions of staff?
Yes, Commissioner Rule and Mike Blackwell, I do have one more question of staff. If I may?
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, Jonathan, on the new building, we've got these sort of trellis details on the southwest side, freeway facing. There's two shown in elevation. Why? And then there's can you walk me through why there is a state? There seems to be just a blank wall. It almost begs for something else to be there, like maybe a third trellis detail. Can you tell me why there's not one there? Was it a design review discussion?
Sorry, I was on mute. Just to make sure I'm looking at the same image, am I looking at the southwest elevation?
Yes. You see the three trellis details there, or the two, and then to the north portion of that wall, it appears to be just open. There's a light detail there, but no trellis, just a blank wall.
So I believe that those three elements are actually centered. You can see that there's a more solid line showing
Yes.
in that elevation. So I think that blank portion is actually offset back.
Okay.
And so it's not part of this cohesive wall. But certainly, yeah, it is a blank wall, and that, if we want to add an element there, that would be an easy modification.
Yeah, I'm looking at that on A2 now. I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah, that makes a little more sense. Fantastic. Okay. And that's all my questions. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, any other questions for staff before we go to public hearing? All right then, I will open the public hearing and I'll check with our city planner and see, do we have any written communications that have been submitted that we can read at this point?
Chairman Rulin, this is Gabriel Perez. I'm checking to see if we received anything in the last 25 minutes. There are no comments that I've received. Jonathan, unless you've received anything, but I've received no comments on this project.
Okay, then I will close the public hearing and we'll open this up for discussion on the Planning Commission. Let's start again with Don. Do you want to kick us off? Commissioner Brown?
Oh, yeah, a couple comments. I think keying off of Commissioner Blackwell's thing about how the opening between the two shopping centers could be closed at a future date, we could probably entertain language in condition 717 with the staff plan where the path of travel between Ocean View will remain free of obstructions and no boxes or guards. And we add a sentence to that and say, and it cannot be closed off without the concurrence of the city planner or some words to that effect. I'd throw that out there for discussion. And the other comment is that in spite of all this wonderful discussions about landscaping and trees, a standard of condition that the owner will maintain all this stuff that we put in place for Ralph's. It's not in there. There's no condition that all the landscaping will be maintained and healthy and will be replaced if necessary and watered. And so I throw that out to the commission that maybe we should entertain that standard condition should be added in there, and expect staff to kind of make sure that it added in other projects like this in the future. That's my only two comments I'd like to throw out at this time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Crandall.
I did want to say one thing about this whole project's been remodeled, and this particular site is 4,000 square feet, is a very, very small percentage of the square footage of the project. And I feel that, I'm going to use the word minor. It's a minor project for this site. So I think requiring it to update the entire site for landscaping percentages, in my observation, are reach. But I think the project is good. I like the idea of putting a condition of approval to maintain the landscaping, also to maintain the city's ability to control the volume of traffic that goes into this tenant space, and I'm really happy with the requirement to keep the access between the two open. So I am definitely in support of this project. We worked really hard at design review, and the applicant worked with us on it. And I think we've got a modest project here with the two tenants. They're both going to have pretty small spaces, but I think it'll serve the city well. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. I'll just give a heads up to staff. It sounds like there's some interest in perhaps adding some text to condition 7.17 and creating a new condition to maintain the landscaping. So while we're discussing, you may want to be working on some verbiage for that, because we may be asking you for that. Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes, thank you, Jim. Well, I too was concerned with the coverage of landscape, and to Commissioner Brown's point, I looked at different ways that we might be able to achieve that without removing parking, and I hesitated even delving into that discussion only because I have a feeling there's going to be some shared use, if you will. And I think it's going to be driven mostly from the Trader Joe side, from the other shopping center. There's often a deficiency in parking in Trader Joe's, the popular establishment, and I think that those parking stalls closest to that center will probably be considered for use. So the capacities at the center now, at the current center, I've never seen them fully met. I've seen surplus there repeatedly. However, as the center improves and new tenants come in, there's likely going to be a substantial increase in usage. So every parking stall, in other words, is going to be very valuable there. So what we could do, to staff's point, is we can add more, though we may not get floor area coverage, but we could add more to to sort of offset the deficiency we're going to see. We could add more that would help us to make this an even better project and have beauty in the eye of the beholder. But I do know one thing, and this commission has expressed concern in the past relative to the visibility of the building, specifically the Stater Brothers portion of the building from I-5. And clearly, as the applicant listened, and as our design review subcommittee was very instrumental in assuring that the landscape palette at the rear portion is substantial. The California sycamores are a substantial tree, and they're beautiful once they get established and grow. But again, the trees are, those trees are in abundance there. However, they will lose their leaves. They're deciduous trees. So once that happens, all that great ground cover is just not going to be visible from the I-5, which is a much lower elevation. All you're going to see is a bunch of trunks and exposed, stucco for the most part. One thing we could add is a sprinkling of some smaller trees that are already in the landscape palette that proposed, something like, that has some continuity along that plane, borrowing from the drive-through, the new building. There are some strawberry trees there that are called out as standards, but they are evergreen, and they're a lower growing tree, which would fill in that line of sight and soften the look from the I-5. That might be a nice compromise, something to that effect. Staff could work with the applicant to achieve that, maybe placing Tier 4 among, varied depths from the property line, just kind of staggered among the oak tree, or not the oak tree, the sycamore tree grove, if you will. That I call it grove only because there's so many clustered together there. So that would be one thing we could add that would help us. And again, a lot of folks are driving through our town on the I-5, and anything we can do to make it prettier, soften some of the hard lines from the freeway would be a good move on our part if we can do it. This is the time to do it. The language that we're talking about, I forget, it was Planning Commissioner Brown mentioned 7.17. That is a good area we could add to that language. I think that, if the applicant is willing to do it, it's really not that big a deal. It is more of a commitment, and it's a longer term protection. And unless there's some, reason legally speaking that it would not be a good, a wise request from us, maybe we can get some response from our legal. But if we wrote something, if we were to modify the language to read something like this, it would say a reciprocal easement agreement shall be recorded to ensure that, and then we delve into the language that exists, the path of travel between Ocean View Plaza and Plaza by the Sea, and so on and so forth. And at the very end, it says the two parcels, and then we add to ensure that the two centers operate in harmony with one another. So that's why we're doing it. We're protecting that I think it's a good idea to allow the applicant to have that freedom between parcels, but we don't know who's going to, they could sell one of those centers, and, minds could change, and there can be, the Hatfields and the McCoys, suddenly. If we have this built in, it's a protection, so it is going to be a major component of that relationship between centers. But other than those things, I think we've, and then plus with staff working closely with the applicant and Public Works to ensure there is improvement and improvements to the accessibility piece. And I'm so happy to hear that there's now been I believe, Jonathan, you said an easement now. We have an easement that extends into the private property area that will allow us to do those improvements that are necessary to improve the sidewalk.
Correct, yes, I confirmed that with our Public Works Division today.
Okay. Yeah, with all those things, the distance that this thing has gone, tire center with all the different things we talked about, the minor facade improvements, now look what we've got. It really is going to be quite nice. And so I'm in full support of this project. If those conditions can be met, I think that, I can stand by my support for this project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kozinski.
I'm in support of this project. I just have two comments. One is, I know we're talking about amending 7.17 to include maintaining the landscaping, but we talked about having that area to be a sitting area that includes those benches and maybe tables. I don't see any language in there, and maybe there should, to maintain the outdoor furniture that the applicant said that they were going to place there in good condition. in addition to maintaining and keeping 1.9, I know the analysis was done on a lower lower volume tenants, and I think the city needs the flexibility to reassess if a higher volume tenant is placed in there. Those are my 2 comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Wu.
This is Commissioner Wu. A few comments on the requested condition 1.9 of removal. I consider 1.9 condition is reasonable, so I like to keep it. Regarding the parking, we have to look at the proposed trash enclosure, conceptual wall removal. I think the last 3 spots, the last 3 parking spots, which is proposed to be removed, could be restored into parking. The drive out in front of it is 5.1% below. So it's easy to just make it slightly longer, then it will be suitable for parking. But since we are deficient on landscaping, it's nice that the landscape consultant add those conditions, and I appreciate that the applicant accepts those conditions to convert the end caps of the drive aisles into landscaping, which the landscaping was non-conforming by removing the living materials. Even if we keep the area the same, there's still a slight increase of non-conformity. But by adding the end caps back, we probably improve it slightly. So I like that. Overall, I think it's a good project, makes good improvement to the area, and I support it.
I have a question. Commissioner Wu, it's Mike Blackwell.
Yes.
Are you referring to the 3 parking stalls on the south side adjacent to the wall to be removed? They're currently shown as, or proposed as a landscape area shown in green with that small retaining wall?
That's right. I will run this whole area to be a pedestrian area for sitting and landscaping. But if the drive aisle goes through, then the landscaping there doesn't do much other than providing some landscaping area, which we can make up from converting the end cap from parking aisle. We should also ask the applicant to put some trees into those end caps, because anytime the size is bigger than a tree grade size, then a tree can survive. So those 3 spaces are removed as proposed, but they could be returned back to parking if they want.
Right. Yeah, I see that the willows are proposed on the opposite side. There are 3 Australian willows, but nothing on the lower portion that you're referring to. We could probably even eliminate that. We could probably even get 1 more parking stall out of that, the first one, because it's likely going to be an underutilized area, to your point. But we could get a tree or 2 in there as well.
Right. And the relocated trash enclosure is located at a position that I don't like this position, but we seem to be out of option. But if we can get some parking back, as I proposed, then maybe the trash enclosure can be moved out of the way, because that corner location is very prominent. Everybody looks at it, and it's not the nicest thing. It's just a trash enclosure, so it would be better to be a little hidden somewhere.
Yeah,
This is Commissioner Brown. Can I make a couple comments?
Sure.
Yeah, without human interaction and being on the dais and doing this by phone, this is an awful lot of design on the dais that I'm getting worried about the parking way, the entrance way, the pathway. We're going to eliminate that and move a parking spot here and there. I think the staff and the applicant have got things pretty well worked out, and we start getting down into this detail and this type of a format is constrained as it is. I'm not going to support any of these changes you're talking about. In other words, the plan is what the applicant's happy with and the staff's happy with. And I think we're going a little too far with design details under this circumstance here. If we can't reach consensus then we should send it back to design review or engineering staff. Enough.
And I'll chime in too. I'm kind of in agreement with Commissioner Brown just because I worry when we start to, restart the parking and that sort of thing, that there are constraints that we don't know about that staff and engineering and the applicant may have already gone over. So I hesitate to do that. Just things seem like a good idea when we're looking at the sheets, but then we haven't covered this like those guys have. So I don't know if that would end up being as positive as we might hope it would be. I will say though, in terms of landscaping, I'm looking at the landscape plan. I'm going to try and steal an idea from Bart and suggest that if you look at the end of those parking stalls, most of those rows have some empty polygons, at least according to the landscape plan. It may be possible to put some planters in there, do some shrubbery, something like that. If those are essentially empty space, they're just kind of leftover space from the end of the parking stall, or they couldn't fit one more full spot. If it's possible to add landscaping to there, or a couple other corners as some other commissioners have stated, I'd like to see that, because when I look at this center, it seems a little more barren to me than other centers, because of the other centers have more, just have a higher percentage of landscaping. And that might actually help the applicant a bit too. I don't think it would be that expensive, and it would bring that part of their center a little more, up to where some other centers are in town. So I think it would be good to have the staff sit down and see if they can't work out maybe some little edge places like that, where there might be some empty space where they could slip in a little landscaping, or even maybe have some vines on a couple of walls that otherwise might be kind of blank walls, and of course that would add to their percentage as well. I'm not quite sure how to condition that. Maybe a condition that they would sit down with staff and try to do another round of landscaping, and we can leave it to them based on the information or suggestions that we give them, and see if they can't, get another 5% landscape coverage or something like that. But that is an idea, unless someone thinks that there might be an issue with that. Someone that want to interject?
Yeah, this would be the beauty of the Zoom call.
Sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Blackwell.
I was going to say, this would be one of the benefits of a Zoom call. So when we have a question, we slide up our little square, and you see it, and you can pick us. So,
we're not on a Zoom call.
Yeah. So to your point, though, and Commissioner Brown, I feel the concern, but that's the whole point of this process is to review each project, even down to the design details. And this is not easy. I've expressed that before, in this format, but we're doing the best we can. But when we're talking about the gradual redevelopment of this property, which has occurred here over years, as we've seen this a number of times in smaller pieces, we have an opportunity now to address things that are important. Parking, even one stall, is important. If we can get it, we should take it. If we're gonna include conditions for mitigation, not just because landscape is fun, but because there's purpose, then we should have purpose, and we should really continue that continuity and integrity through all components of the project. So that's my take on it, though I'm sensitive to Mr. Brown says it's a difficult thing to do, and we start, discussing things that have, a broader impact that we may not be aware of. But again, that's why staff is here to answer those questions. If there is some reason why we didn't get another extra parking added out at the wall break when we could easily, I don't know about 3, but I see just based on the slope and the calculation, we could squeeze another one in there, a full spot easily to an underutilized area. But again, that would serve the neighbor that is currently experiencing the same ownership, experiencing severe parking issues. If you ever shop at Trader Joe's, you know what I'm talking about. It's a problem there. It's dangerous and it's a problem. So if we can get more, I'd be looking for opportunities there too. And then, putting in new landscaping in little pocket areas. I agree with you, Commissioner Ruan. I looked at that as well. There's line of sight issues that staff would probably identify, certain types of curbs. Most of that's painted. So when you start putting raised curbs in there for attention to the soil and irrigation, et cetera, you're trenching. There's all kinds of things that come up as a part of it. All valid and all important. We haven't even talked about lighting yet, so I won't even go there. But, these are things that I think are within our purview and important. We have an opportunity. This is a gateway property. It's an important one, and I think again, it's come a long way. But it's got some work still needed. The sidewalk area, the trees that are proposed there, all of that staff's going to work through outside of our review. We're trusting in staff to address that, and we can trust some staff to look for areas to increase the landscaping as well, maybe even another parking. But at that point, it's out of the discussion with us, but it's in the record still. So, we've all voiced our concerns, and I don't know if anybody's going to support any of the new conditions that the other has suggested, but I guess we'll just have to see. It's my 2 cents on it.
Okay, so, and this is just, I'm sorry, go ahead, is that Commissioner Crandall?
Yeah, I am here. I want to thank Don for speaking. We spent a lot of time at design review, and Shen and I think even Blackwell may have even been involved when this came through design review, and we had a shot at it. There's a lot of things we don't know about that we have to take into consideration. This piece of property is broken into multiple lots. It's not just one lot. And I think we've got a good, viable project. I think we can request, outside of a condition for staff to work with the city landscape architect and the applicant to maximize the landscaping. I'm not worried about getting one more stall in a project this size. I mean, we're shoe-nailing it. We don't need to design that this evening. I think we have to also remember, we don't design the project for the applicant. We give them suggestions and see what their designers come up with. So I think we're getting a little too hands-on at this point, and they're all valid comments, but I think we can do it with just direction to staff and the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wu, did you have a comment?
Yes. Well, I attended a design review, look at this conceptual design. We focused on the new building design, and this wall connection was presented to us as, by the way, we have an item, we have 2 options. We can go through it, or we can make it a pedestrian sitting area. And so the discussion wasn't thorough. This time, it just gives us a little more information and opportunity to look at it. And also the new landscapes consultants and new conditions to convert those handicaps into landscaping area. I like it a lot, and this is the first time I've seen it. Some of this handicap area, they're quite large, and they're almost as large as a parking store. So apparently they're much bigger than those little pockets in between the parking spaces. So I think they deserve some attention about the landscaping design, not just covered with ground cover, they're large enough to have some trees. So I believe that it's appropriate to, it doesn't have to come back to Planning Commission. As I said, I support this project overall. But I think it's worthwhile to have a landscape, to have the applicant to revise the landscaping plan and have the landscape consultant to look at it one more time, especially the landscaping design of the handicap areas.
Okay.
Commissioner Ruin,
Thank you.
I just have one comment.
Okay.
This is
Commissioner Kuczynski.
Yeah. During design review, I remember with Commissioner Wu, we went over this area with the applicant, and we did request that the applicant provide it to be a sitting area with landscaping and trees. That's why there's benches there. I don't see any trees, but the intent was that there would be a sitting area that with trees for shade. And I don't see that on the drawings.
Okay, thank you. I did have a couple of questions for design review. One question was, was there any consideration of, since the building's being demolished, was there any consideration of, you were looking at the site plan, of moving the building up towards the street frontage, as long as it's being rebuilt anyway, to conform better with our general design guidelines?
To my recollection, no, access and the drive-through was kind of the dictating feature. They had to get this thing behind the gas station area. And there is a property line somewhere, and Jonathan may remember where it is. No, the proposal was not on moving the building forward.
Yeah, I'm guessing that they want to use the same pad, which would save some cost, but, you know, I just wanted to broach the question of having it be closer to the street, because that's what we want to see with our buildings, and obviously with a remodel, as a simple remodel, we certainly wouldn't require that, but I wanted to see if there was any reason really preventing them from doing that, like a property line or easement or something that makes it impractical. So maybe, Jonathan, do we know if that's the case off the top of your head?
Sure, yeah, I'd love to jump in. That is something that I evaluated kind of before we got to that level, and that was actually an initial discussion I had with the applicants when they were first considering demoing and building a new building, is that generally our design, our urban design push is to have buildings on the street frontage. We do have a little bit of competing information in our policy documents. However, so within our design guidelines, Camino de los Mares is indicated as being an auto-oriented area. And so in this area, within our design guidelines, we don't have the same push to have buildings on the street frontage. So there's a little bit of misalignment in between kind of the more generic general plan, or the generic urban design goal, with the more specific design guidelines information about the auto orientation of this district of Camino de los Mares. So staff, given that kind of more specific direction within design guidelines, was comfortable maintaining the building here for that reason, as well as two other pieces. One, as mentioned, being able to maintain the queuing in a way that would minimally disrupt traffic flow, and to have kind of the rear side of that building. The purpose of the use permit for drive-throughs is to evaluate any potential noise and traffic impacts, and so to have the noise elements of that directed towards a 24-hour gas station and an off-ramp really does minimize any concerns there. And then finally, of course, to recognize that locating in a different spot would also have some ultimate parking potential impacts there too. The biggest piece, again, though, comes to, if this was on El Camino Real, staff certainly would have pushed for the building to be at the street frontage, but given the auto-oriented nature of Camino de los Mares, within our design guidelines, we were more comfortable with the location that's presented.
Okay, I understand the reasoning. I'll just kind of let staff know what my opinion is about it is that the buildings being up towards the street isn't, I don't feel, an auto-oriented, or the buildings being away from the street isn't an auto-oriented design. In fact, even if for an auto-oriented area, it's nicer to see nice architecture rather than, a couple of acres of parking lot. So, I won't push. I don't know if there's much support for that, and even though I think we should, look at that, and maybe I would have hoped that we would have struggled with that and seeing if that was a possibility. Probably would have raised the cost, unfortunately, for the applicant, but sometimes that's the things to do to improve that sort of a thing. But I hope in the future we're looking at that a little more rigorously earlier in the process, because even in an auto-oriented area, they deserve, to see perhaps nice architecture instead of a bunch of parking lot. The other question I had for design review was, I know part of this application is the menu board, and usually we look at menu boards, as rigorously as other signage. And did you guys see? I'm looking at page A.2 of the plans, in the lower left corner. There's an example of the signboard, and I'm just wondering. Again, I didn't see anything in the minutes unless I missed it of design review. Did you guys have an opportunity to see this signboard in design review? Menu board?
Jim, this is Jonathan. No, the menu board was not indicated on the plans at that time. That was a staff comment at design review that should be provided before advancing to planning commission.
Okay, so it would have been good if they'd seen it because they could go through it. I'm looking at so let me just comment on it visually because I didn't look at it in design. It's actually a nice looking design. I think it's a little more ornate than we would usually have, but that isn't a sin. But it also has an element like the fleur de lis, and I've never seen that on Spanish Colonial Revival. I could be wrong. I think it's more of a French symbol. So in terms of this area needing to be more Spanish Colonial Revival, I'm a little concerned. Even though it's a nice design, I'm a little concerned about the style of the design, that it doesn't fit with the SCR vocabulary that we would normally have in the city. And Bart, maybe you've got an opinion on that.
Let me get off mute here. That's basically invisible. The menu board is along the drive aisle, which is the drive aisles between the gas station and the freeway. So this really isn't all that visible, especially when it's low and freeways down below. So I'm not too concerned about it. The ornateness, even with this sketch, they aren't held to. So we can certainly give a recommendation to staff to work with them to go more Spanish colonial rather than with the fleur de lis, like you say, on top, and I'm sure that they would be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to. I'm not trying to ask them to redesign the whole sign, in some wholesale way, but and again, just because it's ornate doesn't make it bad. It's just a little. We tend to go a little simpler in town, although we've been getting a little more ornate, which is fine. But it's if some stucco base is appropriate, if putting something other than the fleur de lis, is more in line with our Spanish Colonial Revival style, then I would like, to have some, condition or have staff, like with the landscaping, have staff sit down with them and see what they can look out and leave it to staff's judgment in terms of changes to that sign, if there's general agreement with that.
Yes, this is Bart Bradley, and that's a good observation on your part, and I would trust Jonathan to work with the applicant to do that, and I think we can do that with a recommendation to staff.
Okay. And I'll just throw my 2 cents in on condition 1.9. I feel, like some others do, that this gives staff some appropriate leverage. I know that what their plans are now, is to have smaller places that will generate smaller lines, but things change in the future. 2 businesses in a building become 1, and these drive-throughs, I've rarely seen a drive-through that doesn't get overstacked, on a somewhat regular basis. So I'd like to leave that in so staff has some opportunity to help manage that in the future if necessary. And that looks to me like this is what I've got just to kind of, try to summarize in terms of what we're looking at conditions. Adding text to condition 717 to add that city approval is required for any changes. Add a condition to maintain the landscaping in a robust manner, much like we've done in some other places. I don't know the exact verbiage off the top of my head. Condition to work with staff prior to the building permits being issued on locating additional opportunities for landscaping, like what we have spoken about here, and also to have them work with staff for the building permits to attempt to bring the design of the menu board a little more in line with Spanish Culinary Revival, again, at staff's discretion in terms of what that should be and to work with the applicant. So those are the ones that I had jotted down. Does anyone have any other conditions that I missed or any other comments on this item?
Commissioner Kuczynski? On 717, we did discuss that this would be a sitting area, which would require the benches and possibly a tree. To just include those 2 for the maintaining of just not just the landscaping, but the benches that we requested and the addition of a tree.
Could would you be comfortable if we included that with the condition on having staff work with the applicant on locating additional landscaping opportunities? We'll just include a statement, like including, we've identified a couple of places and now we've identified another one, that area with the benches, as part of what staff will take with them to help fulfill that obligation.
Yeah, and what about the benches? Maintaining the benches.
Oh, maintaining the benches as part of the condition to maintain the landscaping? Yeah, that sounds right to me. Landscaping and landscape furniture.
Yes.
And as I'm talking, usually I see staff working. I don't have that opportunity right now, so I'm just hoping that staff is jotting down some ideas for the verbiage for this when we make a motion, assuming that the other commissioners are in line with this.
I'm on it.
Chair, this is a
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Wu.
I'd like to clarify that on condition 5.5.3, for the parking aisle entrance, currently asphalt change the buffer shall be converted into curved landscaping areas with the plant species to be approved by the city's consulting landscape architect.
So good, that's going to handle part of
I'd like
what we were
to
talking
be
about.
a little more specific that the plant species to include trees if practical.
I would be more comfortable leaving it to staff at this point. Again, as per Don's comment earlier, I think it's great if we can get landscaping in there, and it looks like staff has already thought of this. But trees would be great, but let's let them figure that out because there may be constraints and stuff under root structures and things like that.
Okay.
I guess what I'm saying is I'm comfortable with staff driving that and doing the best job for us at this point.
Okay, Jim, this is Commissioner Crandall. I would like to make a motion then.
Well, that's great. I will do that, but I do have a question for you, Jim, on clarification. for 7.17. Okay, you had read that,
Commissioner Blackwell. Excuse me, I just want to clarify, this is Commissioner Blackwell talking.
Thank you. I did throw out an idea of using a reciprocal easement agreement approach to this, and the way you read your note, it did not reflect that language. And I was wondering if anybody is afraid of that or wondering about what that really means. If maybe Mel could give us the pros and cons of this approach and whether or not this is a common application that something the Planning Commission could ask for the purposes that we're intending to use it for.
Yeah, this is Mel. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, so in response to the question, it is fairly common to require reciprocal access easements like this. That said, the explanation that was given by Jonathan is accurate. I think that the commission has everything that it needs and staff has everything that it needs going forward to ensure that the issues that the access easement would cover are covered. That said, if you wanted to have a belt and suspenders approach, you could certainly require the drafting of reciprocal access easement. However, I would not add that to the existing condition. I would simply add a new condition that requires the applicants to work with staff and neighboring property owner to enter into a reciprocal access easement that is approved by the city attorney and by staff. Now, the risk that you run is we cannot require the adjacent property owner to agree to the reciprocal access easement. So by conditioning this approval on that, we are giving the adjacent property owner some leverage over this even going forward, because if they don't agree to it, then the entire project is halted.
Understood. Okay. One of the things now I was seeing as a benefit potential here, a special case where we have the same property owner. Unfortunately, the applicant is not here to respond to it, and it's one of the downsides to this approach we're taking. But to simply ask for it, I think there might be a benefit there to everybody, because if that other parcel should sell, this thing is in place and it basically runs with the land after, correct?
That's correct. It will run with land.
Okay. So thank you for that clarification. And so it's an important condition we all consider, and I don't see anybody's faces. I don't know what the reactions are. Jim, could you consider doing maybe a straw vote or some sort of a discussion on this among the commissioners?
Yeah, my thought is if we can do this with a condition and not an easement, given what Mal has told us, I'm just thinking that with a condition, we could, I'm guessing, waive the condition at some point if we needed to. Say one of these places was turned into a set of medical offices or something. Then you might not want that pass-through. And to kind of force that pass-through when it becomes inappropriate, possibly, might be, we might be walking that in or something. So, if we can, if we can do it with, I don't know, less weight, or kind of the least amount of verbiage, the least amount of overhead is what I'm thinking, then that might be the preferable way to do it, unless there's a compelling reason to do a reciprocal agreement. That's my feeling on it.
Okay. I would think that the compelling reason would be just to ensure that the harmony between the two centers is maintained. So those two centers operate in harmony with one another, which would be the whole point of sort of an easement. So we could, if the rest of the commission is not in support of a separate condition of approval as recommended by legal, then we could simply modify 7.7 to end with that statement. So it would read, leaving out the first part of this ending sentence, I would say serving to connecting the two parcels to ensure that the two centers operate in harmony with one another. Just so we have something in there with a little more weight. To your point, Jim, that would be a way to do it. But,
Okay, and what do the other commissioners think? Is there any opinions one way or another on this?
So Commissioner Wu, I think Commissioner Blackwell's comment is well taken by me. I think there is some legal ramification that needs to be clarified and confirmed by both owners. Just imagine that from this parcel, the stormwater is going to drain into the neighboring parcel. Now, in the future, if the applicant who happens to own the neighboring parcel right now decides to sell a neighboring property, and the new property owner, can the new property owner erect a wall to stop the traffic? And and there's also stormwater situation. So I think the reciprocal easement is a clever idea, and the city attorney's suggestion is certainly a very good strategy because we have this applicant to ask for it. The owner of the neighboring property happens to be the same owner, so there's no reason to reject that.
Sure. Does anyone have any other input on this item?
I might.
This is Commissioner Brown. I'd like to make a couple comments, if I could.
Okay, if you would, Commissioner Crandall jumped in before you. I'll do you next.
Okay.
Now, when we're talking about an easement, that's usually recorded against a deed, and there's usually a specific location defined as where that easement is.
That is correct, yeah.
And really what we want is joint access, because it could move and be relocated if the buildings are reconfigured. So is the easement the way to go, or just a reciprocal access agreement the best way to go?
Same thing. Yeah, it's a good question. It accomplishes the same purpose. An easement certainly is a burden on title, a burden on the property. It's an interest in real property. You see it done both ways, where there isn't a defined geography, if you will. You can simply have a reciprocal access agreement, whereby both property owners, in this case, I guess both properties are owned by one owner, agree that there will be reciprocal access, which can move from time to time, but there always have to be access between the two centers.
You know, that I like that. I like that a little better.
That's Commissioner Brown. When you go with an easement, you got to get survey people out there, put survey pins down, and lock things in before you record the deed. And what we need to do at this level, at a planning commission level, I think is be more global and more higher altitude, and just modify 717 to ensure there's always access between the two centers, regardless of future ownership. We need to work the ownership that way. It's just we don't want to make this thing too complex. We don't want to build. We just want to build a Mickey Mouse watch here and not get too overly complex going forward. So I'm comfortable with a modification of condition of use 717 to ensure future dual access between the two centers. How we want to word that. Other than that, then I'm not going to support anything else going forward. Otherwise, we're getting too complex.
Okay. I have some language. Let me interject, Commissioner Blackwell here. Point taken, Mr. Brown, you're right, there is some extra hoops to jump through. It's really not that big a deal. I mean, I've done a number of these myself, and if I can do it, anybody can do it, trust me. So, but yes, to Commissioner Crandall's point, to your point, to Commissioner Wu's point, if we've got support for modification to the language of this, it just simply says a reciprocal access agreement shall be recorded, or shall be, what's a better word for that? Shall be agreed to between parties, and then we go into the rest of the existing verbiage, and then ends to ensure that the two centers operate in harmony with one another. That would address it. That would be a modified condition without a requirement or a separate condition for an easement. What do you guys think?
It's Mr. Crandall agrees with that, Councilman.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Ruin. I just want Mal's input on that. When we start wordsmithing, I get worried, but it's not an easement, but it still ensures connection between the two shopping centers. Mal, do you see any issue with that verbiage?
No, I don't see an issue with that. As long as we can, the staff and the attorney kind of play with that verbiage. I think the intent is that we want to have reciprocal access in perpetuity between the centers, right? I mean, that's the basic intent. As long as we have that, then we can make an amendment to 7.17, and we're off to the races.
Okay. Well, then why don't we let you guys, construct that sentence or two, and would that work for you, Commissioner Blackwell?
Absolutely. And I just want to acknowledge Commissioner Brown's point, and I am also sensitive, as you are, to the applicant's needs and improvement to the property. So I think it's also a very valid point, and so I'm happy to see that we can at least find a way to do it. Whether that access moves to one side of the property or the other, we're going to have something placed there to ensure that access exists somewhere. So yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Well, I know Bart's ready to make a motion. Let me just make sure that no one has any other comments or that we missed anything before he does.
I'll make one comment. Do we want to make it vehicular access or pedestrian access? I think we're probably going to have to say vehicular and pedestrian access.
A good point.
That sounds right to me, yeah.
Mr. Commissioner, would you agree with that now? If you allow me to interject, the applicant may not want a reciprocal access perpetually established. We don't know. So I think it's prudent to have the staff to check with the applicant.
I can interject. This is Jonathan. Fortunately, I have my computer, and our applicant is listening in. He has agreed. First of all, I'll comment, yes, Commissioner Wu identified correctly. We do already have a condition requiring some of those additional landscape areas within the parking lot itself that Chair Rulin had mentioned, and they have agreed to that previously, so they're fine with that one. The applicant is fine with a condition requiring perpetual access between the two properties, so they are comfortable with that as well. And then they are also comfortable with the added condition regarding maintenance of landscape. We do have a code provision that specifies that, but I did write something up so I can read that out here in a minute for an additional condition there. The one comment I thought that they indicated they wouldn't be supportive was a loss of parking would be something that they have to go back and identify that and get approval from Stater Brothers, and so they did identify. It doesn't seem like that's something that's currently being discussed, but I did want to put that out there. A comment that I got by email from the applicant that they would have concerns if there was a requested reduction in parking. But the other conditions that have been discussed, yes, the applicant is favorable to including those.
Okay. Well, does staff have some text for us for these conditions as Bart makes the motion?
I do. I'll let, of course, this is Jonathan. Again, I'll certainly defer to Mal if he does want to chime in and redirect any of the language, but I'll start with, I'm going to add a condition in section 5. And this would be condition 5.
Jonathan, this is Bart Cramley. Why don't I make the motion and then let you read them into the motion?
Okay. Do you mind if I real quick address the general nature of them to make sure I have everything taken care of?
No, it's great.
Okay, so I have one condition regarding finalizing the design of the custom wrought iron frame for the drive-up menu board. I have another condition or a modification to existing condition 7.17 regarding the reciprocal access. And I have a final condition, 7.30, and I'll clarify that there was a duplication. So 7.30 is being removed because it's a duplicate of 7.28, and it's being replaced with a condition regarding the maintenance of the landscaping as well as the maintenance of the indicated furniture items. I'm not including a reference to trees. The landscape plan indicates that there are already 3 proposed trees in this area. So we are covered by the plans that have been provided by the applicant for that piece. So those are the modifications that I was looking at.
And we did have one, and I mean, it's great that we already have the condition, and I don't know why I missed that, to do the areas in the parking lot. But I think we did want you to take one more look with the applicant and see if you couldn't come up with other creative solutions as well, like, you know, there may be an opportunity on some buildings for trellises, you know, maybe something, you know, like, you know, creeping vines on the trash enclosure to kind of, you know, soften that a little bit. There may be, you know, kind of give it another once over and see if there might be some solutions that haven't been considered yet.
The vines for the trash enclosure are something that's already covered as well, actually, within 5.5. How about I add a 4th bullet under our general landscaping and incorporate Commissioner Blackwell's comments that the applicant will review potential for a couple of trees at the rear property line that are more decorative trees, and then have a generic note that and any further opportunities for vines at the site.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Jonathan, that's fine with me, and I apologize. I don't know why I missed that with the landscaping at 5.5. So, and go ahead, Commissioner Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. No, just the decorative part, I think it's more evergreen. So you're talking about it, the discussion on the sycamores, deciduous, and then having sort of a, you know, we're losing greenery, in other words, when those trees lose their leaves. So the intent was to add a little bit of filler for extra, you know, additional screening throughout the year. So it could be, you know, the strawberry tree, or, you know, at your discretion to find something if the applicant's willing to do that. That would be very helpful. So evergreen would be the key word over decorative in that write-up. And it can be a lower growing shrub, 6 feet, 8 feet tall, something like that. But,
well, that's it. Okay, Bart, do you want to give it a try?
I'll make it very brief and simple. I move we adopt resolution number PC 20008, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Clemente approving site plan permit 19203, conditional use permit 19205, architectural permit 19204, and amended discretionary sign permit 18546, Plaza by the Sea drive-through, a request to allow single-story commercial building with a drive-through and accompanying menu boards with amplified sound and an outdoor dining area on a site that includes a parcel located at 610 Camino de los Mares, with staff direction and revisions to conditions of approval, as will be presented by Jonathan Lightfoot, and also an access agreement between the 2 properties that will be presented by Mal, the city attorney.
Brown, second.
Well, hold on. Let's read before there's a second. Jonathan, you want to read in your conditions?
Sure, I'll go ahead and read those in. With modifications to existing conditions, beginning with subpoint 4, underneath existing condition 5.5, reading, the applicant shall incorporate additional evergreen trees at the rear of the property and coordinate with the city's landscape architect consultant on additional opportunities for vines to soften walls on the site as possible. Continuing with condition 5.